Hello and welcome to the latest installment of PSG Talking. I'm your host Ed, and on today's show, we're talking all about PSG's recent results, including the win over Manchester City, the draw against Stade de Reims, and we look ahead to midweek match against Stuttgart. But before we get started, let me thank all of you out there who have subscribed to PSG Talk Extra Time on Substack. We really appreciate your support. Hope you enjoy the content we've been putting out. You can always suggest topics for us to discuss by using the chat feature. If you haven't subscribed, I hope you'll consider doing so. It's $5 a month, $50 for the entire year. Get access to more podcasts and articles from myself and top journalists who cover PSG. All right, joining me today, we have longtime PSG Talk contributor Marc Damon. Marc, how are you? Are you excited for this big Commanders-Eagles game later?
No. As a Giants fan, I'd rather them both lose if possible.
You're rooting for a giant comet to come down then.
No, I'm rooting for that scene in The Dark Knight Rises where they start the game and Bane comes out with the nuclear bomb. That's what I'm hoping happens, but I'm guessing that won't. So
No. Yeah, well, you could always be Bane, but I don't think that's going to happen. And then we also have a newcomer to the show. We've got Greyson Lee. Greyson, we were talking a little bit before, but just introduce yourself to the listeners and how you became a PSG fan. Just tell us more about yourself.
Hey, I'm Greyson Lee. I am from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Roll Tide, but not as much as Alice Paris. But yeah, I became a PSG fan when I was pretty young, maybe 6 or 7. What a curse, and the best thing to ever happen to someone. I spent a lot of time with my grandparents as a kid. They had BN Sports of all channels to have in the middle of the South. And so I got to watch those early PSG teams, slightly pre-QSI era, with your Sacco as a captain type of play. So yeah, I've been a fan ever since and had no idea what I was getting myself into.
We're going to just bleep out the Roll Tide, but we do. James Teague has been on the show a bunch of times, and he's in our Discord channel. He's a big Alabama fan. So there's a PSG Alabama connection going on here. All right, well, let's just get into it, gentlemen. Why don't we? So let's start. Let's go back a little bit. Wednesday's match against Manchester City, it was essentially a must-win match. And when PSG went down 2 goals, things looked pretty dire. I know my head was kind of hanging there. But then Ousmane Dembélé, Bradley Barcola, João Neves, and Gonçalo Ramos scored 4 straight in the second half to complete the comeback and secure the 3 points. It was just a big celebration with the fans at the end. It was great. So let's start with Marc here. Just what was your main takeaway from that match?
Main takeaway is that PSG were finally clinical in a Champions League match for the first time in a long time. It didn't feel like they were peppering the City goal with chance after chance after chance, but the chances that they took, they scored. I mean, I'm not sure what the ratio was between shots on goal and actual goals, but I'm sure it wasn't particularly a big difference. Really should have scored 5. This was a game that really shouldn't have been close at all. PSG were the better team by, I would say, a good margin. City looked slow. City looked like they couldn't keep up with the PSG pace. And, that goal, which was incorrectly ruled offsides in the first half, that goes in, and then you don't have the sort of weird bounces that City got for those other 2 goals, which again, credit, they were able to put them in, but those weren't really bad defensive plays or anything. They just sort of, goals that happened because the ball bounced the wrong way. Take those out, and it just really wasn't competitive. And I think it's nice that PSG get rewarded for once for playing a kind of game like that and not, hitting the post 7 times or losing that game 2-0. How many times do you think in the past PSG lose that game 2-0 or 2-1, where it's like you go out of the game going, oh, they should have gotten something out of that, but they couldn't finish, or they made a bad defensive mistake in the wrong possible moment. And this was more just a team that didn't lose its spirit when it could have lost its spirit falling behind like that in sort of a flukish way. And they kept playing their game. They kept generating chances. They kept getting good possession. And at the end of the day, they deserved to win and did.
You mentioned some of the stats. So PSG's shots on target 9, and they had 4 goals with an XG of 2.81. So it's the rare occasion where PSG outperformed their XG. And then you mentioned the goal. Correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't it come out maybe the next day that was incorrectly ruled, or at least there wasn't sufficient evidence to say that was clearly offside, the goal from Hakimi, but I think it was Nuno Mendes who was offside. Did I read that correctly?
That is correct. And you could get a whole 20 minutes from me about how I think replay has been bastardized in a way where it's now become a way for the referees to relitigate the game as opposed to what it's supposed to be there for, which is if you make an egregious mistake to correct it. And I won't get into it, but I just thought that was really just a great example of that. And luckily PSG were able to overcome it.
Could you imagine if they ended up losing that game 2-0 and that goal? We would probably, this whole podcast, we probably would do 45 minutes on just that goal being called off.
But I won't, but I could.
Yeah, we could, but PSG won, so we'll leave that to the side. Grayson, same question to you. What were some of your takeaways? Did you learn anything new from this PSG side in this big win?
Sure. Kind of to what Mark was saying. We did get slightly unlucky with how the ball did just kind of roll in front of the goal for them to tap in, like Haaland's goal. You simulate that type of ball into the area 8 times, 10 times, we maybe get scored on once, and it was unfortunate, but such as football, that sort of stuff happens. We do see rather high XG chances for Man City, not a ton of them. And that's kind of the story of the game. Both of their goals, while they were fortunate bounces, they should have been put away, and they were. The only big chance I can really recall not going in against us was that Savinho chance where he's one-on-one and kind of gets run down by a combination of Hakimi and Pacho. Yeah. And we see a great kick save from Donnarumma, which we don't see often. He is more of a save with the hands type of guy. So I was really happy to see that.
I was going to say, let's give Donnarumma his flowers. I mean, I thought he was good on the night. The 2 goals, I can't really blame him too much.
No, there's really not much you can do. Maybe he can palm the second or the first goal rather a little farther away. But I mean, it comes back off Marquinhos. What are you going to do? It happens. I think what we really looked good on, aside from finishing, where, I mean, maybe discounting the Barcola goal, there was nothing Ederson could have done about either, all 3 of the goals rather. And I think we looked excellent in the press. I mean, we were winning the ball in the final third, which is not something you see us do a ton. We were high pressing, and I think City kind of just didn't have the composure to be able to play out the back against us. And that's something we rarely see. Especially in recent years when we have these superstar players. No one wants to make a run at the ball. No one wants to press. We saw João Neves everywhere across the field, making people make incomplete passes by simply hassling them, intercepting them himself, or even just tackling. And that set us up, maybe not for goals every time, but it's one less attack our defenders have to deal with. It gives them that protection, and it also creates high XG chances that we have a chance of turning in or at least regaining possession. So I think that was the biggest takeaway for me. I understand maybe you can't press every game like that when you have a congested fixture list, because you have a greater chance of players getting injured. You have a greater chance of, not winning that initial ball, and then they're breaking away and it's a 2v1 against a Marquinhos or a Pacho, which I don't necessarily think they're the best defenders in space. So I understand why we can't do that every game. But I think this was perfect against City. They're very, very vulnerable to the counterattack. That's Pep's greatest nightmare, is having fast wingers running at you. And that's exactly what we can do with Barcola and Dembélé. So I think it worked out for us. I think we probably did deserve to win, maybe more towards a 4-1 or a 5-1 even. Slightly lucky that Ramos goal was onside. Guardiola didn't know much about it, just kind of hit his shoulder and dropped for him perfectly. But a great finish. So where I'm not complaining about, an extra goal. But yeah, that's kind of what I took away from it.
And I want to talk about that. Like you said that they can't press every match. You risk injury and that sort of thing. And Mark, I'll go to you with this one. Why can't we see what we saw against Manchester City on a more routine basis? This is the best performance of the entire season, and we had to wait till the end of January to get it. Do you expect that we will see this more often, not just when our backs are against the wall? Like, do you think we could see this more often?
I think you will. I think as this culture is built, as the style of play is really ingrained in the players that are there, I think you'll start to see it more consistently. I don't think pressing, I think it's easy to, we see it a lot, saw it a lot sort of in the older days of PSG with the superstars. You'd get like a half-assed press where they would like kind of run at the guy, but not really. And
we call that doing a Messi.
Yeah, one guy would press and the other guy wouldn't. And, it wasn't to really do that well. You have to have, 11 guys play, 10, 11 guys playing as one unit to do that. Like it takes time for a team to really develop the ability to high press like that. And when you don't have the time on task and you don't have the depth, like I think you saw it in the Saturday game, which we'll get to, PSG just couldn't muster a good enough press to cause good scoring chances against a team that was really tough, with a 5 at the back and really locking the game down. They didn't have that energy or the depth to really go out there and high press against Reims the way they did on the Wednesday game against Manchester City. And when you develop that depth, I think you'll see more of a consistent level of performance. So to answer the question, I think you will see it happen more as this team sort of rounds into shape. But right now you're only going to see it once in a while. And it's really important that PSG develop the ability to high press the way they're doing, because it's going to make their lives easier and it's going to generate more high-level scoring chances than just sort of pinging the ball around with the center backs and the fullbacks and trying to, unlock these low blocks that you're getting. And I think you saw in the game against Manchester City by its very definition plays a high line, is a little bit spread out. They're vulnerable when they don't have the ball. So, it really was a good confluence of events that allowed PSG. You see, even in that first goal, Barcola passes to Dembélé. There's just so much space. Once Barcola beats the first defender with that little flick, it's everyone running backwards with their hair on fire. You didn't see a City team that was organized. And, go to the second goal. Again, it's like just letting Doué get a shot off like that, gets off the post. Barcola, is in the right place at the right time. And then the third goal, we've seen that third goal a lot on our end, where we just don't cover a free kick, or we just leave a guy open on a free kick. We've seen that an awful lot. So it was nice for that to sort of go our way for a change.
And Guardiola made the mistake. I think he had just brought on John Stones, and he was the one that kind of let the ball get all the way over to João Neves. So it was some.
Well, they also
really
didn't guard João Neves, which would have been They did. I think it was in the CBS post game where they pretty much ran the same free kick set in the first half. I think that was the Neves header that went over the bar, or like the 6th or 7th minute of the game. And then they run the same thing again, and they still don't defend it. And this time it bounces to Neves, and he makes puts on a really nice header for it. So, I just think it's important to note that, PSG did a good job in that game and took advantage of a team that, I just think it hammers home the fact that they deserved to win that game, and they were the better team. And you saw City, struggle a little bit against Chelsea over the weekend until they were able to figure it out. But that was satisfying, and it really would have been frustrating to lose a game like that. I don't know if that answered your question, but
no, you did. And people wanted to take away from PSG in this win. They said, "Oh, it's Manchester City; they're having a down season," but then they go and they beat Chelsea. So I still think this is a very talented City side that obviously missing their best player in Rodri, but still a really good win. Grayson, let me get your thoughts on the starting lineup, because when it came out, I thought, oh, wow, okay, Kang-In Lee over Dembele. I know Dembele had been battling the flu, but that was certainly a decision. And then Fabian Ruiz in midfield over Warren Zaire-Emery. Do you think, well, and we're going to preview the Stuttgart match, but do you think this is PSG's best Champions League lineup right now?
Is it the best, assuming Dembele is starting on the right wing in place of Kang-In Lee? Is that the
Yeah. I mean, well, you tell me. I mean,
yeah?
Kang-In Lee played decently well, and I thought against Reims, I thought he played well, but I don't know if he gets into the lineup over Dembele. So, would you say the best lineup is with Dembele instead of Kang-In Lee?
I would definitely, yes.
Yeah.
I would say Dembele. I mean, his ability to progressive carry, it does help us get out of a high press, which we're not very good at. We saw that against Arsenal. If we can't play out to an outlet, we're kind of doomed to lose the ball and concede a high XG chance. I think the best starting lineup for PSG, I think that's tough to know, because for Luis Enrique, who sees these guys day in, day out in training, I think he doesn't have Ramos in that starting 11. And far be it from me to say that I know better than him. However, the stats do disagree with him. I think having someone in the actual number 9, and I think we have this idea that every team has set positions. I think we have the idea that we send out a false 9 and that's where he plays. I think that's generally not the case. They're not told, okay, you are playing left winger or false 9 today. We're saying these are the zones you occupy. You can float out to the left, out to the right. Your role, however, in this game is to create space and play, the ball into space or make runs, etc.
They were switching all over in that City game. Like the wingers were switching. It was fluid, to your point.
Absolutely. I mean, we saw Barcola off the right. Mm-hmm. We saw Dembele everywhere. I mean, he was front and center for the first goal in the box. And I think that can work. I think we do have fluid players like a Doué, like a Dembele, like a Barcola, even Lee, who I think is better in the midfield, but can really play any position. And that's invaluable to a team like us. I really hope we don't let that slip through our fingers. But I think the best starting 11 includes Ramos. I mean, his numbers are impeccable. He is putting up 0.77 non-penalty goals per 90. That is unheard of. He is in the 98th percentile among forwards for that stat. And we know that we have a problem with goal scoring most of the time. I know we didn't against City, but I think that is kind of an outlier in the way we play. I mean, he is taking about 4.29 shots per 90. Yet again, 97th percentile. He is the upper echelon. All these stats that he has are better than the Isaacs, the Gyökereses, and even the Osimhens of the world, who we're wanting to go out and spend a whole load of money on. And I know he's not the best with his feet. He's not great with link-up play. However, he presses like a demon. He will run down any ball you ask him to. I mean, we see him sometimes past the halfway line at our own end, tracking players down, creating hard passing opportunities for the opponents, whether that's just blocking off a passing lane or stripping them of the ball. So I think he is included in our best 11 if the attempt is to play with a non-false 9, a true 9.
Yeah, I wonder if he's just too stationary, like he's a center forward, and that's what he does, and he does it really well, to your point. But
sure,
he's not as fluid. Like putting Doué in there, Doué can do a lot. He is good with his feet. He can beat a defender one-on-one. So maybe that's just what it is. It's nothing to do with Ramos. It's just that
I can see that. Yeah,
Luis Enrique needs players that can move around.
I think to that point, the fluidity will only take you so far. If we're not breaking and not counterattacking like we were against Man City, if we are playing against someone like even Stuttgart, who do not press as high as Man City do, we kind of get to the edge of the box and we don't know what to do. Maybe a player takes someone on and does something amazing. I mean, you look at Dembele against Bernardo Silva. That was insane. But we can't ask them to do that against 3 and 4 defenders when they're doubled on the sidelines without having someone in the middle to cross it to. We are often crossing an empty space or just pulling out and crossing it across to Hakimi to reset on the other side. I think it does leave us a little lacking in the just presence in the box department. I mean, you're not going to be crossing to Doué or Lee Kang-In. They're just not going to get up there and win that header. I think they have some of the lowest aerial win rates in the squad. So if you are playing on the break, I think the false nine is excellent. I think you can play down the wings and just have a runner into space. But I think when you're having a team that does kind of set up that defensive block, even if that's not immediately, if you have to get down there and then they do it, I think having a nine in the box is game changing. But the midfield, I'm kind of with. I think Vitinha is kind of a non-negotiable. I mean, he is excellent at being kind of that metronome, switching play back and forth. His long ball accuracy is insane, nearly 100%. Fabian versus Warren Zaire-Emery, I don't know. Fabian's yet again a good dictator of play and will drop a little deeper, will put in a defensive action. But boy, is he slow. I mean, he gets dribbled past 4 and 5 times a game. I don't know if you can have that when you're setting up with this high line. I think you need someone with a bit more pace. So I do lean Warren Zaire-Emery.
I do too. He's just not been in the greatest form this season, but I think all PSG fans would prefer Warren Zaire-Emery, but it's frustrating. He just hasn't. Go ahead, Mark.
This has been a debate for the last 2 months, I think, of when PSG really struggled in November and December, when Gonçalo Ramos came back into the squad, and you really sort of before that, you really didn't have a choice as to what you were going to do. I think the argument was, okay, well, is Colomwani going to fill that role? And obviously the answer was no. But when Ramos came back, and here's a true nine who, again, I can't argue with any of those stats because they're all true. And I tend to like when PSG play with a nine. I tend to like their chance creation better. But Luis Enrique very much doesn't see it that way. I don't think he sees Gonçalo Ramos as a 90-minute player. So, if you don't see someone as a 90-minute guy, we talk about who are the guys that stay on the field for Luis Enrique for the full 90-plus minutes of a game. Besides the goalkeeper, you have when Marquinhos is out there, he's a full 90 guy. Achraf Hakimi is a full 90 guy. Pacho's becoming a full 90 guy. Most of the center backs usually are. I don't even think Mendes is always a full 90 guy because he sometimes runs himself out. Vitinha is a full 90 guy. João Neves isn't really a full 90 guy yet. You see, there's not and I don't think he sees Zaire-Emery as a full 90 kind of guy, and I don't think he sees a lot of their attack options as guys that you put out there and they're as effective for the full 90 minutes of the game.
So I think definitely not.
I think Luis Enrique makes the decision, and I think the fact that they have so many attacking options now is based on his idea. It's you're not going to, again, remember what this was like 3 years ago, where Messi, Neymar, and Mbappe would play when they were healthy, would play the full 90 minutes. There were no other attackers on the team. Right? The only other guy was Hugo Ekitike or somebody. There was nobody else to come on. So those guys would play full 90s. And now I just don't think you're going to see those attackers staying on the field for full 90-minute games because there's a luxury in having the ability to rotate guys in and out and give different looks to the defense. And I think he sees Ramos as a guy who would you rather him at the beginning of the match or would you rather him at the end of the match? And you have to make that decision based on the kind of game you're playing. And I think in the Manchester City game, he makes the calculation that, look, they play such a high line. I'm going to take advantage of that high line by playing false nine, because false nines are effective against those high lines because it's hard for the center backs to really figure out who they're supposed to take. And the matchups sort of start working in your favor when you have that much space on the field. In the game on Saturday against Reims, they played with Gonçalo Ramos for, I think, the first 60, 70 minutes of the game. And it made sense because Stade de Reims were playing so low and they were playing with that low block. That's what I would like to see. I would like to see a manager who makes that decision about who they're playing in the front based on the team they're playing and based on the tactical need. I don't want it to be, okay, these three have to play and they have to play these amounts of minutes and this is the style we have to play. I'd rather see that flexibility. because now you actually have that opportunity to really, you really finally have that opportunity to take advantage of it. And I'm assuming we're going to talk about Kvara in this podcast, and
we're going to get to him.
We'll get to him, but
yeah,
the options that they have now are just so good. It's just about figuring out, who to use when, and making sure that everyone understands that this is, when you're at PSG, you're going to play, but you're not always going to be, playing every game, full 90 minutes. And it's going to really be based on what the team needs at any given moment. And I'll just make a point about the Fabian Zaire-Emery thing. I think Enrique appreciates the possession that Fabian's able to bring to the game. He's a little more reliable. He's not going to turn the ball over as much. Warren Zaire-Emery's more workhorse in the sense that he's making runs. He's an aggressive midfielder. He's not a possession guy in the classical sense. And when you put out a midfield of João Neves and Vitinha, I think that Fabian's a good counterweight to those two guys, in that I think Fabian's just sort of a good cycler of the ball, and it takes some of that pressure off Vitinha to have to do everything in terms of possession. And then it allows somebody like João Neves to do what he's doing, which is pressing like a demon and making critical passes in key moments to get guys open. So I don't mind the Fabian decision, honestly. I think for what Luis Enrique is trying to do, I do think it makes sense.
And I think we'll probably see him. We'll get to the Stuttgart preview, and I think we'll probably see him there. And I think your point is well taken. I also think that, we've got a World Cup on the horizon. We know that there's going to be international matches where these guys are really going to be playing hard to qualify. And I think having a lot of options in your team and a lot of competition, not only is that going to just elevate the level of play overall, but then you have cover for when players are tired or recovering from an injury and that sort of thing. We kind of talked about on other shows about these guys just play too many games. So we kind of think we have too many attackers, but in the seasons to come, I think
we really don't.
We're going to really need all these guys.
We really don't. It's the right number. We've gone so long with the old model of the sort of big three, even back to Cavani, Di Maria, Zlatan, where it's like, that's not that's more the exception than the rule. Like, most teams have sort of attack by committee. If you have the finances and you have the amount of fixtures, if you can throw bodies at a team of attackers, and you think about, like, in that Manchester City game, you go from Kang-In Lee for a half to Ousmane Dembélé, and Man City looked like they'd just been hit by a truck. Like, that's the difference when you can bring guys on like that change the game, and as the opponents, you're not really able to settle in and really make the adjustment. I think I just want to make that clear. I think it's really good that we have this amount of attacking talent on the team.
Yeah, we got a pretty solid bullpen now. Before we just had a couple of really good starters. Let's go to the next topic. PSG, they followed up that incredible performance. Bit of a letdown against Stade de Reims. It was and that's a team that typically gives PSG some trouble. We saw Kvara introduced at the beginning of the match briefly, and then he started out on the left wing. Gonçalo Ramos started at center forward. You had Ousmane Dembélé on the right wing. Dembélé scored a really nice goal. It's been on a bit of a heater as late. I think it was Kvara assisted for that goal. And then Nakamura for Reims, he answered in the 56th minute after it looked like PSG's attackers didn't want to track back and kind of left Warren Zaire-Emery there left to defend on his own. And so we'll go to Greyson here. What did you make of Kvara's debut, and what stood out to you in this match?
Well, I'll start off with Kvara. Yeah. I do think the assist was a thing of beauty. The dribbling run from left to right to set up Dembélé. I think he's a little lucky that shot does go in. I mean, considering how well the goalkeeper was playing, for him to kind of flap at that and it go in the middle of the net, I think it does make Kvara look a little better that went in, despite the amazing dribbling run. But overall, like I'm not going to tear down a player his first game. I mean, he is just now arriving here. I think it was a week ago. He hasn't had time to train a ton with the team. I'm honestly shocked he started. I understand we need to rotate after a big UCL night and with one on the horizon. However, maybe one more week of good training and just a 15, 20-minute debut would have suited him better. But I think we did see in the statistics and just with the eye test kind of the things that you're going to see with Kvara. And that's a lot of losing the ball. And I don't know how Enrique is going to react to that. He is someone who loves possession. He likes recycling. On average, last season with Napoli, he was getting dispossessed around 4 times a game, which is not really something you see from a high-level forward. But I think that can be coached out of him. I think he was kind of playing hero ball with Napoli. You're taking on as many players as you can, and with Georgia as well. I mean, what are you going to do? You're the best player on the team. You're supposed to dribble. You're supposed to take shots. But we saw high-volume dribbling and shooting with not a ton of results. He's kind of just popping it from outside the area, which sometimes looks great. I mean, on a highlight reel, you're banging at top bins from 30 yards. It looks pretty good. But when you see it in game, when you had better options and maybe you tried to dribble through 3 guys, I could see that being a concern. He completed 2 of 7 dribbles against Stade de Reims and dispossessed 5 times. I mean, that's not something I think we'll see every game week. I think he will get more used to the system. He will link up better with players. We saw a couple of really good 1-2s with Vitinha, with Ramos, and his other colleagues. But I don't think it was the best debut showing, but it's way too early to make any type of call on how he'll fit in the system. He might not even be playing left wing next time he steps on the pitch. But overall in the game, I thought we didn't play terrible. We did play against a low block. I thought the lineup was a little interesting. We essentially started 2 winger/center attacking mids in our midfield. And I can understand the logic there. We know that they like to sit deep and hit on the counter. And so you like guys that can shoot from range or create opportunities. And then we had Fabian kind of holding it all down. And I think Fabian had a great match. I mean, he would put up the most tackles in the team aside from Nuno Mendes, who's everywhere that game. I think he might have been our man of the match. We didn't put up a ton of XG. We probably did just deserve the 1 goal. Ramos misses a couple of good chances. I think he was rather unlucky. I mean, hitting the goalkeeper's leg on a kick save where he's not even set and then hitting the post, it's going to happen. I think there are worse times for it to happen. You'd rather get all these not as great shots out against a team of their quality and in Ligue 1 where we're still undefeated. But I think we did not look great against a low block. And I think our attacking mids kind of let us down on the counterattack. I mean, the 1 goal that they scored, Due is tracking the man who puts it in the net and then just kind of stops running after him to leave Beraldo against kind of a 2v1 where the attacker lays it off and he hits it bottom. You know, that's not on Donnarumma. It's slightly on Beraldo, but I wouldn't blame him with the whole thing. We just didn't have a midfielder there to press or track back, or Due probably could have got there and didn't. So I think what we saw was a low block and a great counterattack. It's going to happen. We're a little hungover from our great night in Paris. And I think as long as we rally for the Stuttgart game, this is more of a hiccup than something to really be concerned about.
Yeah, it's something we typically see after a big Champions League game, a little bit of a letdown. Again, like I said, this team usually does give PSG some troubles. Mark, talk to me about Kvara. What did you like? What didn't you like from him? And then just maybe the performance as a whole, about what you expected against Reims?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we've beaten them in 2 years. I think it's just been like draw after draw after draw. And, you know, sometimes that happens. It's not so much the result. It's just always frustrating to go from playing these sort of like expansive, fun, energizing Champions League matches where, you know, where it just the level is, you know, we talk about like American sports. You go from the regular season to the playoffs to the championship, and the intensity ratchets up every single sort of. As the season goes along, the intensity goes up. In soccer, it's, you know, you get these sort of interludes of intensity followed by a match like this where it's like, we got to do this again. You know, because the Champions League is just so fun, and that match was so fun. You get all the emotion of it, and then you have to go like play in the league against a team that's just sitting back with 10 guys, and doubling your
We
wing.
talked about this before. Is that maybe some of the reason why PSG struggles in the Champions League? Is they're going against these low block teams, and then they've got to ramp up to. They go from basically 20 to 100 game to game from League on to the Champions League.
It's just a different.
Yeah.
It's a different skill set that a team has to have. Like it's not like, it's not like other teams don't have to do this when they go to their domestic leagues and play bad teams. Like other teams have to do this all the time. It's not. I don't like using that as an excuse for it. I think what this was a situation where, again, a team could be physical, that was fresher, that hadn't played in a week. They doubled the wings, which seems to be the strategy that a lot of these teams will do. That once any one of our wingers gets the ball in a dangerous position, they just double immediately. And the only way you really beat that is if you can high press them to death, which I don't think PSG had the energy for, or really what would have helpfully helped them more is being able to transition quickly out of midfield, which I think you said, Grayson, how the sort of attacking mids weren't. The Doué and Lee weren't doing the job of really winning the ball and then progressing the ball in a way where you get the opponent out of position so that they don't have time to set the block. And what would happen is PSG would win the ball, they'd make a couple passes, Reims would set up their block, and then PSG would work backwards, and you'd have to start the whole process over again. And there wasn't that smoothness going from, transitionally, they weren't effective. And the other part that I thought, and I'll get to Kvara last, but this team really, really needs a backup right back, like desperately, because I 100% agree that Hakimi needs to not play these games. There's just he's doing too much. He's the most important player on the team right now, and he can't be spending any time playing in these, in between Champions League match games. Like that's absolutely 1,000% the right decision.
Side note, I was surprised he's just as tall as Chris Paul, because the Spurs were in Paris and they took a picture together. Hakimi, sneaky tall. I didn't know he was that tall.
He's a bigger guy.
Yeah.
And he's the engine that makes the whole thing. He's the engine that makes the whole thing function. And you're not going to get a right back that's of his caliber to be his backup. That's just not going to happen. But you need someone that can functionally play the position, because what PSG have to do, and we've seen it anytime Hakimi hasn't played, is they don't have a right back that they have to go out of their formation to play like a 3-4-3 kind of, where Mendes sort of goes. They're not in their right formation in these games, and you have to play. I think it was Lucas Hernandez. What was the back line? It was Lucas Hernandez,
Mendes, Beraldo, and Zaire-Emery.
Yeah, so Nuno Mendes is not a center back, but he's basically playing center back in a back three. Zaire-Emery's bumping up, and then Kang-In Lee's going to the wing. It didn't look right, because that's not the formation that they're successful in. And
the goal that they scored, that Nakamura scored, is because you have Beraldo and Zaire-Emery there, and that's not their positions.
Yes, exactly. They literally didn't have a right back on the field. So they were able to just take the ball. They literally, Diouf just rolls the ball out, and they literally just transition the whole length of the field without anyone touching them. That's because you don't have a right back on the field. So I think it's really, maybe it's not going to happen in this window, probably not, but that among other things to me are the off-season priority. You have to find someone that can play that position so that you don't have to play Hakimi 40 matches a year, because that's going to burn him out. And you don't want to burn a guy out in his prime like this, because he really is the difference maker. Now, Kvara, I thought he was sort of so-so on the wing. I don't think he affected the game in the first half really the way you would think, just because I thought he was just too close to the touchline, and I thought it was just too easy for them to defend him. But they made an adjustment at the start of the second half, and you started to see him cut inside, and eventually I think he was playing false nine there for a little bit before they took him out of the game. I think they put Barcola on the left wing and then moved to Kvara inside. For Kvara to be effective, he's going to need the freedom positionally to move around and do stuff. And it's like Neymar in that way, where it's like if Neymar really didn't have a position, it was just sort of the Neymar position where it's like he could be on the left, he could pop up in the middle, he could play false nine, he could do all this, he could do everything you want him to do, and he could be anywhere he wanted to be. And I think Kvara is going to end up being in that mold where, you look at like a Bradley Barcola. Barcola is a winger, I think. I think classically a wing player. And I don't think Barcola works if he's trying to do what Kvara can do, like cutting inside out and being that kind of facilitator playmaker from the outside in. He needs to be taking on guys on the wings, getting past people, working to the byline, cutting back, making cutback passes. So I don't think they're redundant. I think there's a really good argument to have both of them and to even play both of them at the same time, because I think they do different things. But you saw the goal that they scored is Kvara going left to right, dragging defenders and pulling the Dembélé defender, who's supposed to be on Ousmane Dembélé, goes to Kvara because Kvara has the ball and he can shoot with his right foot. Kvara makes that little dish off pass and Dembélé, puts one on frame and it hits the guy and goes in. Like, I thought second half Kvara was far more impressive. And I think that they're going to have to figure out, like, Kvara will have to play false nine sometimes. Doué will have to play false nine sometimes. But I don't, if their thought is Kvara is going to be the starting left winger and, be that kind of player, I don't think that's what he does best. But I think he showed in the second half the kind of dynamic player that he can be.
It's great to have options. That is for sure. He won't be able to play this coming Wednesday. Let's get to the Stuttgart match. So, he will be able to play if PSG advance to the knockout stage. So we've got Stuttgart away on Wednesday. The percentages say a win or a draw should absolutely see PSG through. But, Stuttgart, they're looking to qualify. They're looking for security and a path to the knockout stage as well. And so, Greyson, sum up your thoughts on what PSG could do, maybe a potential lineup, and give me a score prediction. Just kind of preview this match for me a little bit.
Sure. I think generally Stuttgart have been slightly unlucky in the Champions League. The numbers back that up. They didn't have as hard of a schedule as us. I mean, ours was ridiculous, as it usually is for a PSG team. But they should be closer to 8th in the XG table for just the Champions League. And I think they're only a couple places behind us in that table. So we do see a little bit of an underperformance, a little bit of statistical variance. It happens just like it happened to us. And I also find it extremely interesting. They did not win a Champions League game until December 11th. So that was losing to Madrid, drawing with Slavia Prague. I mean, they lost 5-1 to, forgive my pronunciation, FK Krevna Sveda. I'm sure I butchered that. But they were outplayed in most of those games, slightly beaten by more than they deserved on occasion. But this is not a team that is as bad as their results show. I genuinely don't believe that they should be behind us, and we shouldn't be where we are either. I think they were both probably top 15 teams. And I would be slightly worried about Enzo Malo. He doesn't always play in the Bundesliga, but in the Champions League, he's been tearing it up for them, especially for a team that's had the results they've had. I mean, he's got 2 goals and 3 assists in about the 5 matches, maybe 6. And I think we do have reason to worry because they also play a similar-ish style to us. They're 4th in average possession, just 1 place behind us in the Champions League. And they have their own version of Vitinha in Angelo Stiller, who is an excellent player. I'm sure someone's going to pick him up this summer. Maybe a bigger team, like even in Madrid, I could see him fitting in perfectly at. I wouldn't say for us because he does kind of play that Vitinha role. We kind of have players for that already. But I do think we will get the win. I think we are still riding the high of the Manchester City game, but I'm sure Luis Enrique is drilling it into their heads. This is not over. We still have one more match. I know that was a great win, but we have to continue this type of form. If we play how we did against, say, Arsenal, we're not beating Stuttgart. They're no slouch, and I think he'll try and really up the intensity of that game. Maybe we see that press since they are a possession side. It's really hard to press a team like Stade de Reims when they just pass it back to the goalie and then boot, you're down the field. But this is a team that we could press. Maybe if we put some pressure on Stiller or their back line, who have not been excellent this season, other than Middlestat, I think we could get a couple of good chances simply off that press, assuming that we see it again.
I'm feeling like you're leaning towards a potential draw. Two similar teams. A draw probably sees them both get through.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if the both coaches are just like, hey, I want to win. Obviously, there's no coach that wants to draw, but don't take any crazy chances. I mean, we're probably not going to be seeing Hakimi and Mendes pushing up as far as they usually do. Maybe they're a little bit more reserved just to try and protect if we get a lead or just to take the draw. But I still see us winning. I still think we'll get through on a 2-1 victory, probably knocking Stuttgart out. I think that would be the final nail in the coffin for them, assuming City beat Bruges, which I think will happen. They're not a bad team, as you said. They just got outplayed at the Parc des Princes, which happens. Can happen to anybody. But yeah, I see us getting through 2-1 win. I think the lineup will be very similar to how we lined up against City. I think Dembélé will start, but other than that, I don't see much variance there.
I appreciate the prediction. And I got to give a shout out to Zaka over on our Discord. He says a win or a draw against Stuttgart means 100% top 24 placement for PSG. A loss gives PSG a 48% chance of advancing. Interesting is that a draw gives both PSG and Stuttgart a 100% chance of advancing both. So, Mark, over to you. How do you see this shaping up? If a draw gets both through, do you think there's maybe a gentleman's agreement before the kickoff there?
I think that sort of thing has happened in football historically, and I think it's something that is obviously frowned upon. I think there's been enough sort of betting scandals and issues of game fixing over the years where I think that's very much discouraged and frowned upon.
Hey, come on. Real Madrid won those titles fair and square, Mark. Come on.
Of course. So did Juventus. But anywho, and that's why all of these games are being played at the same time. There's going to be, 18? There's 36 teams, so is it going to be 18 games getting played at the same time, which is craziness. Here's what I think, and Grayson's making the point again. Stuttgart are a good team. I would say they're fourth in the Bundesliga. They're 32 points in the Bundesliga. They're fourth. They're a good, not great team. I think PSG would qualify as a great team. Not an all-world team, not a team that is any favorite to win Champions League or anything, but they're a great team. They have great players. I think their Champions League this year so far has been really hard because some of it's luck, some of it's style, some of it's, losing your striker for 3 months and having to play all those games, having to play at Arsenal, having to play at Bayern Munich, just it's not been smooth, but I think this is a good enough manager with a good enough team where you avoid the worst case scenario, which is falling behind early and having to really open up and try to, make the comeback on them. But let's say this game is 1-1 or 0-0 or 2-2 in the 70th minute. At that point, do you see maybe the game gets a little bit slower? Maybe they start passing a little more around the midfield. Maybe Stuttgart is a little less apt to want to chase the ball. And maybe maybe you see more sort of 30-yard shots from outside the box that go out like 10 feet over the bar. Maybe there's not as many fouls. You might start to see something like that. I wouldn't be overly surprised. But I think you're going to see at the beginning, I think the two teams are going to try to win the game. It's just circumstantially, once you get to a point where it isn't mutually beneficial to either team to lose, you might see some business decisions getting made here and there. But I can't fully trust PSG to just go out there and bury this team 3-4-0 like they've have in Champions League past. It's not exactly the same thing, but a bunch of years back, I'm not even sure exactly when it was. Maybe our statisticians can look it up.
Yeah.
We had a must-qualify game against Crvena Zvezda, which is, I think, the team, Grayson, you were trying to pronounce earlier.
That's probably exactly
It was
it.
on the road at Crvena Zvezda, and they had to win or draw to qualify, and they did it. It was like last game of the Champions League. And I've also remember a time where to win a group in 2017, all they had to do was beat Ludogorets at home.
Mm-hmm.
And they end up drawing that game, finishing second. And then, instead of being first in the group, you finish second and you have to go play Barcelona. And that's where that's the remontada season, obviously. And then I think the Galtier year, the sort of lost Galtier year, where they were unbeaten in the they were unbeaten, I think, in like the first 3 months of the season. You win a game against, I don't even remember. Please tell me, because some of this memory is a little fuzzy. Yeah. But that was the game where somebody, I think Benfica, they were in a group with Benfica. And they were in a group with Benfica and Juventus. And PSG should have won the group, but they took their foot off the gas in the last game and only won it by like a goal against Juventus or something. And then Benfica scored like 5 goals in the last 10 minutes of the game, win the group, and then PSG have to go play Bayern. I'm sort of glad that situation isn't what it was, because I think that was a bit, I think this new group format has sort of corrected that problem, where you sort of have to where you're really worried about having to blow teams out, in a group stage.
And you were going back. I was even thinking about PSG when they had to go to Dortmund. Was it December 2023? It was the last day of the group stage, and they went down a goal. And was it Warren Zaire-Emery, I think, scored?
Yeah.
And that secured the place into the next round.
Yeah, again, there's been a lot of them.
We've been here, and that was under Luis Enrique.
There's been a lot of them over the years. We've been watching this a while. But I'm making the point, basically, that it's the last game. Anything can happen. Take nothing for granted. I don't think they're going to take anything for granted. I think they're going to be focused in on this match. I think this is the only thing that PSG care about right now. And I think you're going to see a good performance. Now, can things not go their way? Yes. But I would be very surprised if they don't at least come out with some kind of draw out of this. I'd be very, very surprised.
I think I'm with you, but I'm just going to caution PSG supporters. I think PSG are going to go down in this game. They haven't played well on the road in the Champions League this season. I think they go down a goal. It could get pretty tense. We're going to be some scoreboard watching going on, and I think late on PSG will find that goal that they need to get the draw and secure. So I'll go 1-1. Mark, did you give me a score?
I did not.
Okay. What do you got?
I think they're going to win.
Ooh.
I do. I don't know. I don't like doing score, but I think they're going to win.
All right.
Here's my logic. I think they've suffered enough in this Champions League campaign, and I think the XG has been so out of whack, and their play to the way they've played versus the results they've gotten, I think have not been necessarily in sync. So I think they're like they were due for a big win against a quality opponent. I think they're due for a game where they just pound a team. But I've been wrong. But I think they're kind of due for that kind of performance. I think everyone's sort of locked into this is what we have to do. And I think you're going to get that aggression. I think they're the better team, clearly. And I think they can – in football, if the better team is on point and the better team is focused – I think they win 95 times out of 100.
I like it. So you guys got wins. I've got a draw. I am predicting City. I don't think that Bruges is going to be as easy as they think, even though the game is in Manchester. Looking at Bruges, they haven't lost since match day. It looks like the last – I mean, they haven't lost their last 4 Champions League matches. So I think that's going to be difficult. And, Pep and City could go be out of the tournament. That'd be pretty incredible. We'll get you out of here. Mark, you mentioned earlier about transfers and you thought PSG absolutely, whether the last days of the January window of signing a right back or in the summer. I'm just curious, Greyson, in terms of the business that's been done with Kvara coming in. We've had Colomwani go out on loan, actually scored a goal for Juventus in his debut. Just talk about the business of January. Are you aligned PSG should be looking for that right back? Or are you more concerned with maybe the outgoing players?
I think we did surprising business this January. It's rare to see somebody big move in January. I think we all get excited for this mid-season transfer window, and oftentimes it's cobwebs, a tumbleweed, the sound effect, all of that. But this summer, this winter rather, we saw with bonuses and add-ons, probably an 80 million transfer go through for our club, and I was taken aback. I did not see that happening, especially in. I think we did need one more player for the front line, especially with Colomwani going out. I'm assuming they knew that going into the Kvara deal. However, I did not expect it to be for that type of fee. I think when you're spending that amount of money, it is a big risk. We've seen that in the past. We just got done with loaning out a guy who cost us 95. And I'm not saying that Kvara is not going to succeed. In fact, I think he will. I think he'll be great for us. However, I think there were bigger needs to address that we still really haven't taken care of, and that's the right-footed center back. We have no one but Marquinhos, and a right back where we have really no one but Hakimi. We have people who can fill those roles. You can throw Beraldo on the right side of the defense, and it's not the end of the world. You can throw Warren Zaire-Emery at right back, but is that what we want to be doing? Especially, Hakimi or Marquinhos goes down. You don't want anyone else but them in those positions in the UCL. And assuming they have the best health record in the world, and they never get injured. Hakimi is still going to be gone to AFCON at some point. So we do need to find backup for that position. I think there's a few good targets out there. I think the biggest aim would probably be the right back rather than the right center back, in which I would be very interested in Doué's brother. But also there are several other targets out there, even from Stuttgart. They have a sort of center back-like right back, which I think could benefit Nuno Mendes, Zagadou. He's French. He's young. He's pretty talented. He's not going to light up the Parc des Princes with a dribbling run. But I think
he used to
really
be in PSG's academy, if I'm not mistaken.
He did. Yeah. And returning to PSG would be a good thing. We've seen countless academy products go on and succeed. I'm not saying he's going to be perfect for us, but it would be cheap cover. The simplest solution is Mukiele out there on loan. I don't know how much we've read into what his lifestyle choices are, or if he has partying problems, if he's not as locked in as some of the other players. If that is true, I side with Enrique over a single player. But I think he could be great backup for right center back and right back. Maybe not the right center back going forward, but either him or Wilfred Singo are probably the best options in the market to cover both those positions in one fell swoop. But I don't know if you get them. Maybe in the summer, though.
I don't know. You might have to run that by Donnarumma, who called Singo's boot to the face.
And I'll just say my quick January
go for it, Mark.
thing. The January window is usually a big nothing, and the last time PSG in January, you think about we'll go back to some recent enough history. Like, what's the last sort of big January thing that they did?
Julian Draxler.
I think it was
that's not nothing.
I think what?
Draxler, we signed him in January. That's not
even
nothing.
Before that, you had Leandro Paredes. To me, was the largest sort of January thing that they did. And that that was, they sort of had to really overpay for that, and you could argue whether that worked out or not. I thought he was a good soldier for them. Maybe not 50 million euros worth of one, but in the Draxler one you talk about, that was the reason they did that was because they were they screwed up the summer window that year so badly. That was the Polish Grzegorz Krychowiak and Tese and Potem Ben Arfa window. They screwed it up so badly that they had to go back in January and fix it and get like Draxler and Gonçalo Guedes, and that
might be the worst window ever in history of football.
It was dreadful. Oh,
yeah, but that's why they went out in that window. That was because they just screwed it up so badly in the summer. But for the most part, you're not going to get major winter transfers. I think this was just sort of an opportunity that you can't really pass it up. It's a guy they wanted to get in. It's a guy you wanted to get in the summer anyway. So like, you get him in the summer versus getting him in the winter. You're going to pay. They honestly ended up saving money on the deal, because if they'd really wanted to go for it in July and August, they probably would have had to have spent 100 million euros on him. Now you're spending somewhere in the 70s. I'd say that's a positive. If it's just circumstantial. I wouldn't, I think they actually made out pretty well on that deal, to be honest.
And I'm the biggest Colomwani fan right now. He keeps scoring goals. He's out on loan. There's no buy option, and so if he keeps scoring goals and playing well, hopefully we can recoup a lot of that 95 million transfer fee that PSG paid for him. So we'll see. So root for him to keep scoring. All right, guys. Thank you so much, Greyson and Mark. Really appreciate you guys coming on. Thank you all for listening and subscribing as well. Appreciate your support. We'll have a lot more on all things PSG. But until next time, bye for now.